Fergus Hodgson with the Impunity Observer podcast. Always my honor to do these. And today we have the author of Being Free is Cool. We have a review on the Impunity Observer website. The subtitle is 8 Ways to Make It Happen. And the lady is Joanna Guerra of Mexico, soon moving to the United States. So, Joanna, we've actually been in touch with you before. You were on one of our shows regarding people fleeing Mexico, and I guess you're part of this exodus under the Morena alliance. What do you call the current dominant coalition in Mexico?
Morena is the political party, and the thing, all the movement that they are doing, we call it 4T, 4T, Fourth Revolution.
Whenever I hear revolution, I think, oh, please, like, just let, because the best growth, of course, happens gradually in a healthy fashion or bottom-up fashion, rather than being dictated from the top down. And so, Joanna Guerra has a doctorate in education with UNAM, or the Autonomous University of Mexico, and she also spent some of that doctorate at Dartmouth University in New Hampshire, which is a lovely state, the live free or die state. And she's the president in Mexico of the Ladies of Liberty Alliance. Amazing. Now, what inspired you to write this book? And there obviously are many books in the classical liberal or libertarian tradition. What did you feel like you could add to that discussion?
Well, I think in Latin America and also in English, most of the books are done to people who knows about liberal ideas. And there are two challenges when that we are facing. We use complicated words and we are not talking like in their language. So if you want to go to spread their ideas, you have to bring these ideas in a way that they can understand, and to bring them in a way that is possible for them to understand, to make it accessible, and so they can comprehend what is liberty and what is responsibility. And because sometimes we always talk about law, I have right, I have the right to speak, I have the right of whatever, blah blah blah, but we never talk about the obligations. So I saw there an opportunity to write a book, and that was my inspiration. And I'm also a teacher in college, so students were my inspiration.
And the headline of our review by Paz Gomez was How Disruptive Innovation and Classical Liberalism Go Hand in Hand. So my assumption is, and I edited this review, is that you promote a great deal of technological innovation for achieving freedom without having to go out proselytizing people.
Yeah, I actually love that review. That was amazing. And yeah, also one of the things that I do a lot is that since we live in a world of applications, I try to explain with things that are close to them. And what is the closest to them? Applications. So I try to speak with, for example, when a government tried to ban Uber in order to protect taxis, or when a government tried to ban TikTok for whatever reason. So there I explain like, okay, we want a small government, and they want to ban TikTok, but then they are taking you the right to be on a trend. So things like that, that's how I try to make it like close to their heart, so they can comprehend those ideas, so they could defend the freedom.
That example of Uber or other things like Airbnb that disrupt cartels is a wonderful one, because we can all see the benefit that Uber has provided to so many people, both those who just need part-time work driving and those who want convenient support with their transport when they go to let's say a new city or whatever it may be. And it has really changed the game, and it's revealed that the cartels are not concerned about quality; they're concerned about protecting their turf, their piece of the pie. So it does flip the, let's say, the moral high ground in favor of free market capitalism or classical liberalism. And you have a unique situation being in Mexico where, as you say, there's this, maybe it's too strong to call them a communist alliance, but definitely a leftist alliance who don't hide the fact that they believe in interference. They don't have confidence in people to build their own prosperity. So is that one of the catalysts too? Just feeling like, gosh, this is really we've got the wrong ideological milieu here.
Yes, that was one of the catalyzers, because I see it every day, not only with my students. I'm also doing the national curriculum for teaching in high school, and they are teaching them pretty much only Marxist ideas without the balance. And they, for example, also changed the name of the topics, of the subjects. For example, they are not learning physics anymore, so they are learning behavior of the element, something like that. It's something that I cannot even translate. It's very silly. So by doing that, when they control the language, it's like Orwell say, they are controlling how people is going to behave, and this is very risky because they are just following that ideas. They are not able to criticize, because when you want to criticize, or when you open that door to for let them think and invite them to read Hayek or Ayn Rand or Adam Smith, they are like the bad of the stories, of the bad guys of the history. Like they attack you, like the person. And it brings conflict as a teacher, and then it also brings conflict in, like, in society. So that's where I saw the opportunity. Like, okay, you cannot understand, like, John Locke or with complex ideas. Let's go to bring it to reality, so we can see that any individual who has a grocery store or an application or any business, whatever, free trade, that allows individual common people, mango people, they say in India, to generate their income, and then they increase their earnings, and they can dedicate to improve their life without government. So that's where I saw the opportunity. uh, not only in Mexico, but I think that's happening in Latin America, like in general. I mean, Argentina is an exception, and there are a few exceptions, but I think it's pretty much all over the place.
Yeah, and even in Argentina, that is such a rare exception to their own history of the last, say, 70 years since the Peronista era. So, yeah, and so you were saying that you're basically addressing a problem that is, you really see in your own life. And if you're teaching at public schools, I mean, I can imagine it must be tough. When I imagine even parents must come to you and say, "Can we trust you?" Or "What is going on in this curriculum?" What do you say to them?
They don't even ask what they're teaching to their kids, which is like a very, like, huge red flag, because I remember my parents always seeing what I was being taught. And for example, now that they are teaching their Marxist ideas, I will be terrified, and I will be doing homeschooling or whatever, or the other thing. But they don't ask. And on the other hand, when I actually suggested to read my book, which is in Spanish, I think it is 47 pages, and it was $1 on Amazon. They complain.
So yeah, in Spanish, it is available right now on Amazon. Ser libre is cool. It's just like you said, it's just $1, and it is also some it's free on Kindle Unlimited. So not exactly a huge burden there. And you found that you became a villain when you suggested even considering an alternative perspective.
Yes, you became a villain. And the funny thing is that they don't attack the ideas; they attack the person. And it's like, okay, you can attack me as long as you want, but give me the arguments, like proper arguments. Don't attack me.
No, it just means that unfortunately, I mean, this is not just exclusive to young children or students. We all suffer from these fallacies of logic, and that is the ad hominem fallacy. People attack the person, not the argument, and it's so popular. It's really sad because often it works, right? They feel like, oh, this person is evil, therefore I cannot listen to her. But of course, that doesn't make any sense, right? The person is just the messenger, not the actual message itself. So now, in the English version, do you want to clarify? So there's a little bit of confusion as to when that is coming out. You think in June it'll be live?
Yes, I think by end of May or early June. And it depends on my editor, because there was some confusion. It was supposed to be on April, but then he is in Buenos Aires. He is actually the biggest liberal editor in Spanish. And he took the risk. I'm very proud of him. He took the risk to make the book in English. And I'm very grateful. Yeah. But then, since the book fair is happening right now in Buenos Aires, he decided to make it a printed version, and then the English version.
So there's a print version right now in Buenos Aires if you're at the book fair.
Yes, it will be next week.
And you do say 8 steps. So the English version you referred to 8 ways to make it happen. Now, where that assumption the assumption there is that someone has already been converted and believes we need a more classical liberal or laissez-faire society. And what are these 8 steps, if you don't mind sharing them?
No, sure. Those are the 8 chapters where I try to make like the most I think like the common principles of any human who is into liberal ideas, libertarian ideas. It doesn't matter if it's classical liberal, anarcho-capitalist, or whatever they want to recognize. We all share the same principles. So that is like a super brief introduction with that. I always say it is like liberalism for dummies. So the first chapter is called Decide. I go for the individual to society, which is into the government. So the first one is related with the principles with respect our liberty, our body, and the freedom and the property to do whatever we want with those three things. Second chapter is equality for all, which is kind of very catchy with all these socialist ideas, but it's the equality under the law. That's the only thing that matters. No privileges because I'm a woman. I need to sit first, or these kind of things, or like these 50-50 quotes that they are trying to impose. And I really like this chapter because I explain it with Star Wars.
Let me just back up this. So basically, you're saying, don't get confused. It's not some 8 steps of 8 actions. You're building a foundation. Let's say almost 8 ideological steps to the outcome. In that 8 ways of understanding the problems to get to the outcome of liberalism, or like you say, under that banner, you could have anarcho-capitalists, you could have more paleoconservative types, people who just believe in decentralization, or let's say, uh, yeah, individualism as a fundamental driver.
Yeah, it's not like a guide to become a liberal. It's just like an explanation of the principles that we all believe in, that we share.
I'm actually working on an article myself. Let's say white pills, or let's say positive or optimistic elements for Latin America. And do you believe that the shock, in my view, shock election of Javier Milei is making a book like yours more amenable to the population? That it's making it more understandable or respectable?
I see this Milei's Trump light of hope that we all needed in the region. Because, for example, I was in Argentina 22, 23, and 24. And when I came back to work in 22, like, oh, the teacher was in Argentina or whatever. Then when I came back in 23 and he was already a president, people were like when I say people, I especially talk about my students. Like four of them were asking me, like, teacher, what makes him different? And then they started to comprehend liberal ideas and what they make sense and why Morena doesn't work in Mexico. And they are starting like to be probably not exactly into the liberal ideas, but at least they are curious to know why he is like so why people is talking about him, and especially with the like the way that he presents himself in this crazy way. So I see it as a hope of light, like a ray of light.
I tend to agree with you that it really is a groundbreaking era with a man who is so unabashedly in favor. We call him a paleo libertarian, kind of like a right wing libertarian. But and so one of the challenges I have, I mean, I grew up in New Zealand, and people often think that New Zealand is some market liberalization haven, which I find very hard to believe. But as you say, it's almost a mindset we have. We don't really even understand. We don't realize that we're almost trapped in a way of thinking. We're blind to it because everyone around us thinks the same way or has a similar, let's say, structure. And we might think that, oh, writing books, this is a waste of time, but actually it does make a difference. Some of us, like me, and I suspect you, take the time to think through our ideas, and we are influenced by great authors. When I was younger, it was Harry Brown, or maybe the from almost a century ago now, the Economics in One Lesson book, the great classic that has influenced many people. So It's true that technological innovation helps, but it does help to have, as you say, accessible books and lectures and communities that change the intellectual zeitgeist. And are you hosting any events? I mean, you work with the Ladies of Liberty Alliance, so you're obviously not just into books. How else have you sought to change the milieu beyond the classroom?
I do it in many ways, um, and across Latin America mostly, and in collaboration with the FIU. I also collaborate with Liberty International, which I'm sure that you know them. I was a speaker last year in Project Arizona, talking about how horrible it is to be living in a transition government from liberty to, I don't know. We all in Mexico we say that we are going to repression, but I don't want to say that because it makes it more real. But yeah, so we were talking about that. Also, I give talks and conferences with Lola and not with Lola in Peru, in Colombia. I have not been in Ecuador. I should. Argentina, and I also collaborate with Liberty Plus. That was my think tank, but it never actually was a proper think tank because we were trying to face about the Castro Chavez ideas in the hemisphere. Um, but it was very difficult because what is happening in Colombia, it doesn't matter to the people who lives in Mexico, and what is happening in Mexico, people in Colombia, they couldn't care less. So it was kind of difficult, but somehow the Instagram page still works. And I write in some newspapers. And with Liberty Plus, we made some collaborations with the FIU, Florida International University, and we create this huge event that is like masterclass from 1 day, 1 or 2 days, and we talk about the Castro Chavez uh, influence in the region, and that's good because actually people from everywhere goes, and or they can see them online. And so yeah, I'm very concerned about what's going on in Latin America and in this part of the world. So I try to do as possible.
Yeah, so just, look, you're in the right place. Of course, almost one of the reasons for being of the Impunity Observer is to address this misunderstanding of Latin American history, where some people, I mean, I can hardly believe this sometimes, but really think that Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro were some kind of heroes. Of course, they were nation destroyers and just brutal, brutal. I don't even want to call them men, brutal male individuals who brought such pain. And there was just an article today. This is still happening. A bunch of Chilean athletes at an event, I mean, a bunch of Cuban athletes at an event in Chile just ran away, right? So whenever the Cuban athletes go to international sporting events, they just run away and try to seek asylum to escape this prison island. And anyone who's, yes, as you say, you talk about Florida International University, I'm guessing 20% of the students are Venezuelan because half of them have fled the country. So it's an incredibly international place. And that to me is the where the rubber meets the road. That's the bottom line, that these leftist or socialist authoritarians have destroyed nations. And we can all talk about ideas, but at the end of the day, do you want to live there? Right? And people show through their actions. They can say whatever they want, but they move to where there is more economic freedom. So, and you're feeling that now. What do you say to these people outside of Latin America who have these rosy images of these dictators, especially Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro? And I just find this shocking. Look, I've been in many conversations where I find people who will say that they just think, well, democracy doesn't work in Latin America and we should support these people. And they'll say the same thing about Rafael Correa in Ecuador, who was elected, but was obviously authoritarian as well and part of the Bolivarian alliance. And I just find it very hard to understand that sometimes. That's but what do you have to say to them? Because of course, you are part of the. You're dealing with the challenge firsthand.
Yeah, it's very challenging because I think that they like these dictators took Gramsci and make it like their life manual. And we should learn from that because the narrative that they present, people actually believe it, and it's not just in Latin America. people in United States, people actually in their countries, they are starving, but they are saying that they have a good president or a good government. That is crazy. I was seeing a video the other day about some women in Cuba, and they were complaining that they were poor, they didn't have for eat, blah 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 blah, and they were saying, "Oh no, but our president is good. We need support from United States." I thought that was sarcasm, but it was not. They were serious. So the narrative that they have is so strong, and they do it with everything. They do it with music, they do it with movies, they do it with soap operas, which are very common in Latin America. They do it everywhere. So it's very difficult to go and stay, and when you show them the facts are boring. We need to find a way to change that narrative and go into the heart as the way that they did it with music, like soap operas, they did it with art in so many ways. We need to find a way to do that and to show that this is not happening. But I think that we need to show in a happy way, because if we only show like the tragedies, it's going to be very sad and no one is going to be in our side.
Yeah, in the United States, there's a famous saying, facts don't care about your feelings, but really it should be feelings don't care about your facts. That if people feel a strong emotional connection to something, they're not going to want to hear facts that contradict that. It's called confirmation bias. We block out what would contradict with our personal opinions. And I remember years ago, I went to Venezuela in 2014, right? And I was shocked to see how many people at the time were supportive of the Chavista dictatorship. I could not believe it. And I also went to a Students for Liberty conference at that time in Washington, D.C., and Oliver Stone was there as part of a panel. And at the time, there had been great repression of the Venezuelan people. But because he was so wedded to this view that Chavismo must be a savior ideal or organization or movement, he just defended them, and I couldn't believe it. This man, who obviously is very successful and otherwise intelligent, was so able to, let's like I said, um, use confirmation bias to defend them. So I recognize the problem, and I find it very tough. Now, we're both in positions where we're preaching to the choir, right? You and I are converted. We've been believers in this for years, and not only have we been believers in it, we've moved our lives to try to find more freedom. Right? We've really taken action about it. And I guess, and I've written my book. I've written books. You've written your books now too. And what can we, what are the, let's say, tactics that someone like you and me could take away from your book in terms of how to elevate the discourse? Like you said, you just we're referring there to being positive and not just complaining. So what other, how would you apply that in terms of our day-to-day lives in a more practical sense?
What I try to do is that I always take like this story of success, because people always want to be rich, no? So for example, I always choose individuals like Mark Zuckerberg. He didn't even study it, because here in Latin America, there's something that you should go to university to become someone. I mean, you are already someone. You don't need to study anything to be someone. So he quit university, a huge university, which is Harvard, and then he changed the world. We cannot imagine a world without, I mean, Facebook is for old people like me. But I say to my students, with what WhatsApp or without Instagram. And so what I try to do is like I try to motivate them, because most of they want to study to have money or to be rich or things like that. So I say, like, you don't need to study to do that. You can be an entrepreneur. And that's one of my favorite examples. And I always take like successful people, or like real people or stories. It's like you have to believe in yourself, and you have to respect your ideas. You have to respect yourself and work every day very hard for that, because that's the magic of freedom. It's like uh and liberty. You have to be an adult. You are in charge of your life and your decisions, and that is nothing more powerful than that. So I think that is like the biggest motivation.
What you're getting at is that there is a distinction between someone who is seeking, let's say, the higher order outcomes in life and not just surviving or focused solely on materialism. So once you get beyond um, just the bare essentials, or just living for materialism, you can focus on the higher order points of intellectual enrichment. And yes, you can really value liberty as an intellectual endeavor. And I guess, as you're saying, many people just don't get to that point. They're just stuck in trying to get past subsistence living.
Like sometimes government wants them so silly, like like, oh no, I'm just surviving and the rich people is hurting me, and it's not okay that just are some like 1% or 2% of rich people, while 99% is like just surviving, and they have this mentality. And when you tell them, yeah, but the network of a person is not that they have them in their pockets, they are investing so people has work. When you explain them and they change somehow this mentality, they understand that they are in charge of their life, which is the first thing, and then they are in charge of their future, and then they are interested in economy, in policy, sorry, in politics, and then they are able to find spaces where they can be free, and they start to see things where having this mother government, like this paternalist government, is not correct, because they are putting some limits, especially now, or at least in Mexico, where it's very clear. Like, for example, there is they want to cancel some kind of music, which I particularly don't like, because they talk about narcos, which not moral. And I don't listen to that. And I don't want my kids, if I ever have, I don't want them to listen to that. But it's not correct that the president promotes this law, uh, because people have the right to listen whatever they want to.
Well, it is. Sometimes I find protests misguided. When I lived in Argentina, the people would just blockade the roads almost every other day. It seemed there were just so many blockades, and often the protesters didn't really know what they were protesting. They'd be against the fondos buitres, which are the so-called vulture funds, and I thought, this isn't really a great thing to target, to be frank. Some funds have lent money to your government, and now you're complaining that they want to be paid back. So anyway, I see, you've got a lot going on, Joanna, and you've got your book out, which is Ser Libre is cool in Spanish, or in English it is Being Free is Cool, 8 Ways to Make It Happen. And we have a review on our website. You also have the Federalismo y Libertad. That's an event. Do you want to clarify what that is?
They are a think tank based in Argentina, and that's how I started my life in the liberal world. Uh, and then we got separate because Argentina was being Argentina. So we started with Liberal Plus, Liberty Plus, uh, more into the international part of that.
So Joanna Guerra, check out her book. We've got a review if you want to, just get a sense for what it's about, and also follow her on X. It is J Gabriela Guerra. We'll have that link in the show notes too. And if people want to just reach out to you and learn from you, are there any other ways to do it that you recommend?
Wow, that would be amazing. I always post on LinkedIn also, which is Joanna Gabriela Guerra. I always post whatever I'm doing, the conferences. I will post this podcast, of course, everything that I do. Also on Instagram, Joanna Gabriela Guerra. That's how I promote what I do. And thank you very much for having me here. I hope to be back soon.
That's okay. No, Joanna, I just really appreciate people who are willing to take a stand and say what they believe to be true. And as you say, in your case, you might suffer professional retribution for doing so, right? It makes your job difficult. You might have to leave your country, so it's not an easy endeavor. I appreciate that intellectual honesty. So, yeah, folks, check out her book. Follow her on Instagram, LinkedIn, X, all these lovely platforms. Otherwise, if you have not already, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this, and consider becoming a full subscriber to access to our analyses and our investigations at impunityobserver.com. Thank you.